everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Love Like Crazy. We're your hosts, Jay and Stacey Coleman. Thank you so much for listening in. We appreciate that you've joined us today. In fact, we have a very special episode for you. We're going to interview our student pastors from our church, Blake and Hannah Comeaux, and the topic today is going to be about Gen Z. And so we're really excited to have them with us today.
Blake and Hannah, it's great to have y'all with us. Thank y'all for being here today. As we get ready we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of people are interested in because we're going to deal with teenagers today. Mm-hmm. And Stacey and I were youth pastors many, many years ago, but today I can just say this. I'm glad I'm not a youth pastor today. I'm glad that y'all, not only because I'm much older.
Glad to pass that baton on.
Yeah, we passed that baton. It was like, woo, thank you, Jesus. But before we jump into this, I do want to thank all of our listeners for being a part of Love Like Crazy podcast. You guys are great. And thank you so much for helping us to build this podcast. As you share this, you like it, and you give us you leave a review, give us a comment, let us know the different topics that maybe you'd like us to talk about. And it's been so much fun over these different seasons of Love Like Crazy. So let's dive off into this. Now, you guys, y'all been around Journey for forever.
Long time.
A long time.
We've watched y'all grow up. We've watched y'all get married. We've watched y'all have kiddos. And Blake, it was awesome some years back whenever you and I sat down in my office and said, hey, come to work for us at the church. And it's been a lot of fun watching you grow in your giftings and seeing y'all grow in your marriage. Yeah. So why don't y'all do this? Tell everybody a little bit about yourselves real quick as we dive off in this.
Yeah. We were saying before this that it's funny, you've baptized both of us, performed our wedding ceremony, and dedicated both of our children. It's like that's the lifespan that we've had at Journey Church. We met in the youth group, so it's fitting that we're the youth pastors, and we say, hey, y'all don't date each other. Stop that. We met in the youth group.
The kids don't really love that. They're like, what? Hypocrites.
I remember whenever you were seeing a young fella in the youth group and y'all broke up, and Blake was like, yeah, now's my chance.
I said, girl, you need a shoulder to cry on? I'm right here. I'm right here.
And I remember being like, brother, you are an idiot for dumping her. He might even be listening to this today. You know who you are.
He was in my wedding. So that's
that's so true.
It's all good. It's all good.
That's right.
Yeah. But tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have two kids. We have Josiah James, who's 3, and Nora Grace, who is 1 year old. She'll be 2 soon. But yeah.
Yeah, getting old. We live right here in Central.
And I just love that, y'all are also the same age as our oldest son, and you grew up with our boys, and now your kids are the same age as our grandkids. And so I just think that's awesome that.
Well, actually, I told Tyler years back, whenever all that went down, I'm like, why don't you ask Hannah? He's like, Ted, she's like my sister.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So to see y'all all grow up and see y'all all still great friends, that's awesome. Yeah. And now, Hannah, we didn't throw this in there, but you are the school teacher extraordinaire. You were
don't know if I'd go that far.
You are the expert when it comes to teaching. And I think, was it last year, the year prior, you were teacher of the year in our school district. And so you know everything about children. So that's going to play into
teenagers, middle school. I teach middle school. So
perfect. Well, perfect training, middle school teaching would be perfect training.
Now, when we were senior high youth pastors, we were also junior high youth pastors. And honestly, out of everything that we did ministry wise in that season of our life, I love doing junior high ministry.
Yeah.
They were a lot of fun. They were not punks yet. And
they're the most moldable for sure.
Yes. We used to always say, like, it's great when they're 6th, 7th grade, but like halfway through 8th grade year, then they were like too good for you. They were too cool.
Yep.
And it's like they just didn't want to even be around us.
Yeah, they were like,
we tried not to take it personally.
They're like, y'all suck. And we're like, well, wait, we were the greatest thing in the world like 2 months ago.
Yes.
But it's just part of that growing up.
Well, I used to always tell Hannah that, I'm glad you deal with teenagers because I don't, that's not my thing.
And here we are. Here we are.
And then we're like, hey, Blake, you want to be the youth pastor? Sure.
Well, I remember having that conversation in my office. I'm like, Blake, I want to present this to you. And you're like,
and we really are having a blast with it. I didn't realize how fun it was going to be. Like, you get to be a kid again when you're a student pastor. There's jokes about the youth pastor and how, irresponsible and goofy youth pastors are, but you really do get in touch with your inner child a lot and goof off and play ridiculous games and play dodgeball with teenagers. And, it's a lot of fun on top of all the spiritual aspects of it. It's a lot of fun just to hang out.
And they're always available. They're always at our house and available. And there are pros and cons to that, but I definitely feel like there's more pros to that. Like they're just always there.
Well, here's the cool part about that is when you think about like Jeremy and Taylor, they were y'all student pastors.
Yeah.
And y'all are still very much connected to them. They have spoken into your lives in tremendous ways. And now these kids, as you speak into their lives, you will get down the road 5 years, 10 years, and there will still be ones that you're very involved with still speaking into their lives. So it's generationally. Yeah. Is that the right word? Generationally. Okay. Whatever. That you get what I'm saying here.
Right.
And so it's that opportunity is awesome.
And it's such a joy too, because we have ones that we call them our kids from when we were children's pastors
They're in their 30s.
And that, yeah, older than you guys and with families of their own. And so it's really neat when we get to connect with them, over time. And so, yeah, it's a joy. It's a joy being a youth pastor.
Well, in addition to that, you also serve as, somewhat the family pastor and have in ministry quite a few other roles. Basically, we said earlier, like you're the student pastor, the family pastor, the fill-in-the-blank pastor.
That's right.
Like whatever's needed.
Whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, that's exactly. Pastor Jay has too many counseling appointments. Here's some, here's some appointments, hospital visits, whatever needs to be done.
Whatever is needed.
Yeah.
That's part of ministry.
Well, that's the definition of ministry, doing whatever is needed.
Well, let's talk about teenagers because you guys have a different take on teens than even we do. I mean, we are, grandparents. Our kiddos are all, I say kiddos, they're all in their 20s now. They're y'all's age. And so we're not at the place yet where we have grandkids that are teenagers, but it'll eventually get here. And y'all interact with the teens in the church and in the community every week, on a daily basis. And so let's define Generation Z. Am I right in saying it's Generation Z?
Generation Z. The ones that are now like the young elementary school, they're being called Generation Alpha.
Okay.
And so the Gen Z and they're like, we're not a part of that. Yeah. They're like every generation. You look back at the one that's coming up and you're like, what is wrong with y'all? Yeah. But that's always been the case. But yeah, so it's Gen Z are the current teenagers that are now, approaching graduating high school and all that. It would be.
I get so confused by all that. You got, what are we?
I think we're X, right? Are we?
Yeah, and then we're millennials.
Millennial, yeah. X, Q, Generation A. I'm like, you got all these different, I can't keep up with all of it, honestly. So we're talking the teenagers today are Generation Z and Alpha. And
Alpha would be the younger, probably more elementary school right now. Like our kids would be Alpha.
Okay.
Like the toddler age to elementary. But yeah, what we work with is what is known as Gen Z and how all the connotations of that. And every generation has those. You look back and you say, well, y'all are this and y'all are that, kind of defined by, and really this one's defined by technology and social media and how the world has changed. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
From, 20 years ago, how different things are.
How very different it is, yeah.
Well, what's wild is a lot of times I'll get my sermon notes together for Sunday morning, bring them to you, take them to Jeremy, because I'm like, I don't want to say anything that I sound too terribly old.
Yeah.
And so you guys will scroll my notes and go through them and, say, hey, let's change this maybe a little bit or whatnot, just because generations have different ways of communicating things. And so kind of I know that there's a lot of parents that are listening to this and they're like, okay, we're talking about teens. Lord help me, because when you go through those teenage years, y'all aren't there yet with your own kids. They are challenging. There's some difficulties that are there. But, one of the things that we came to realize, even when you make it through the teen years, your role as a parent never ends, or your prayer life's always going to another level. So let's kind of define Generation Z, like what is going on with them? Where are they at? We've talked about this in past episodes. We talk about technology and all that kind of stuff. So why don't you guys tell us, because you're on the front lines with them every day. Tell us a little bit about, you say they're defined by technology. What all does that mean?
So we were actually talking about this the other night, just the fact that when we think back when we were kids, like when we were little kids, like toddlers, our parents didn't really have cell phones. It wasn't really until we were like upper elementary school. And I remember really our middle school years was when like MySpace and then suddenly Facebook was a thing, and it was like
flip phone. Thought I was real cool.
Yeah, like that's when. And then like I remember my parents were like, well, you can have a phone, but like you can't have a camera on it. Like we're not taking pictures and posting pictures online. Like people don't need to see who you are. Like they don't need to know who you are. Whereas like these kids have never experienced anything different. Like everyone in the world knows what they're doing at all times, and they know where they are. And like, that's just not necessarily always healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, I think comes all of these different feelings and emotions of like, everybody always knows where I am. I'm always connected, but yet I'm not connected.
Right.
Because there's not as much face-to-face time because they're always right here on my phone. And we were even talking about like with our own kids, we were watching a movie or something one night, and I looked over and he was on his phone and I was on my phone and the kids were watching the movie. And it was like, wow, like this is what our kids are even seeing. Like, mom, dad, like you're making your phone more important. Whatever's going on in there is more important. And it just kind of like the Lord convicted us in that moment. And it's like, that's what we see a lot too.
Yeah. And there's something interesting about maybe the generational gap is bigger now because things have changed so much more quickly than they do in the past, right? Because I mean, you think about early 1900s, not much changes year to year. And now it feels like if you look back 5 years ago, the social status quo has changed. The language has changed. The political tensions, everything has changed so quickly and so rapidly. It can almost make that divide, even between millennials and Gen Z, feel massive because they have been through one of the most seismic changes in modern human history with the internet just being such a permanent part of everyday life now like it never has been before.
So true.
Do y'all see that, you know, I know that with social media, and when you're talking about Gen Z, you're not necessarily talking about Facebook. You're talking about TikTok, Snapchat, things like that. I'm assuming that Snapchat's still pretty popular.
Snapchat is Be Real is
I was
the
about
thing
to say,
now.
now they
I'm
have a
learning
thing called
things.
Be Real.
I thought I was young until I became a youth pastor. And then I realized I don't have style. I don't know the slang words. Apparently the way I dress is old. The music I listen to
you
old.
you had some like Nike Air Max.
Yeah,
You know,
I
just
had like some Nikes.
everyday like shoes, whatever. And
Like,
the
my
kids were
dad
like,
wears
my
that.
dad wears
It's
those.
like,
and you're like,
okay, fine.
okay.
And like, my dad's pretty stylish, I guess. And I'm like, what is I don't
What does that
okay.
even mean?
Yeah, and even the slang, I'm just like, I don't know what y'all are saying. I don't know. So I feel like, you know, in the same breath, we're around them a lot. And even sometimes we still feel, even though their parents are older than we are, that generational gap because they are so different. That's every generation, but it's kind of exacerbated by the by the technology advances that have happened.
It keeps changing.
Let me ask you this though. Do you see that with all of this going on with the smart devices, with social media, do you find that that Gen Z is isolating themselves from their peers? I know that they're probably isolating themselves from their parents, but do you find that they isolate? Because you talk about being on your phone when y'all are together watching a movie, and we know that screen time amongst them is steadily on the rise. I think the last time I looked at it, it's like 7.7 hours per day of screen time. So do you find that they're isolating themselves away from their peers?
Yeah, and I would say even there's studies coming out now that show the more social media usage you have, the more disconnected you feel from people, which is so opposite of the way we think about it. But then I look at my own life and I say, okay, when do I feel the most droggy, the most depressed, the most down, the most in a funk? It's when I've been on my phone the most. And so you think about like these kids and they'll say things, you know, like they have so many followers and so many friends. They know what everyone's doing at every moment. And yet there's this increasing sense of isolation. No one understands me. No one sees me. Depression has been on the rise in this generation. Suicide has been on the rise. You would think that people who are so connected would feel more connected. And really, we see that in our own lives. The more I'm on social media, the less connected I actually feel because it kind of gives you this false sense of what connection really is.
Yeah, and it's like
very
this
confusing.
overload of information.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and even when you're scrolling on your phone and it's like, okay, I want to read this post. Well, that's about one topic and this is about, and it's just like constantly your mind is having to shift as you're scrolling. And it's just information overload. Like I don't think we were really built to take on that much information at one time.
You said this in a previous episode. We were talking about technology, and you said that we're the most connected we've ever been in history, but the most disconnected we've ever been in history. At the same time. Because everybody thinks, oh, we're so connected, but you're really not.
Right.
I mean, just because you're friends with somebody on social media does not mean you're connected with that person.
Yeah.
Well, and then too, are you finding there's just such a lack of developing skills to actually interact one-on-one, like eye contact and being able to like hold a real conversation because they're just so used to texting and instead of having, you know,
they're
one-on-one
definitely
interaction.
for sure a lot more shy.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, it could just be the group of students that are coming in, or it could just even be the group of students I'm teaching. I can't say that for all kids, but I feel like the ones that I've interacted with, they are a lot more shy. Or even the ones that I'll feel like they're so super outgoing. I'm like, okay, well, come on, like, come help me, like, introduce this new student to this other child. Like, come help me. And they're like, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you're so outgoing. You talk to everybody. And they're like, well, that's not really like my personality. Like, I'm not that outgoing. And it's like, I think they just haven't had enough practice of.
So you think that it appears on social media that they're very confident, very extroverted, but whenever you interact with them in real life, they're somewhat introverted, a lot, maybe some insecurities going on.
And I will tell you one positive coming off of the amount of information they receive. They are so intelligent. Like it will blow you away in conversations how intelligent a 13-year-old is nowadays because of the information they have access to. So kids will come in the youth group and they're like, yeah, I've already studied Buddhism. I already know the tenets of Hinduism. Like what does Christianity differ from that? Because they have 3-hour YouTube lectures they watch. Right. Everything is at their fingertips. And so they will challenge you intellectually because they are very smart, very quick. And like everyone who's young, not very wise. The Bible says that wisdom comes with age, not with information. But they are, very intelligent, and that'll keep you on your toes. There's questions you didn't think you'd have to answer from a 13-year-old. Wow. And they'll go and research what you said because there's, influencers on TikTok and YouTube they can go watch, and they're very self-educated and very informed.
Yeah. Well, and in education too, like we're seeing a big shift because it's like they can get the information that I can teach them from anywhere. So it's like, I've got to focus more on these problem solving skills because there are going to be things that you're not going to be able to find all the answers to. And so it's like, okay, what are some problem solving skills we can learn? Those types of things. Because it's like they can find it all the time. They can Google it at any point.
Yeah. Whereas I think education used to be more rote memorization. Right. It's like you don't need to memorize this date. You can Google it. When did Napoleon fight at Auschwitz? You can Google that. It's how I think education should be and is moving towards how can they apply the knowledge that they're intaking to live a productive life.
A question for you though, in that regards, if you can get knowledge at your fingertips just by Googling, are they really learning the material or are they just regurgitating what they are Googling?
Well, and that's what you'll see a huge shift now in curriculums. There isn't as much rote memorization because of that, because they can just Google any information and they can just learn it. It's a lot more of application. Okay, we learned about this phenomenon. Like now let's apply this to your life. Like now let's take this and create a scenario or like if you're talking about math, like I want you to write a budget. I want you to go in and figure out all the bills you're going to have to pay and all the things. Like it's not just, oh, here's a formula. Oh, you learned it. You got it. Like it's like, let's actually apply this because you can't just look all these answers up at this point because you're going to create something of your own, which is interesting because jobs are now a lot more creative and creating things.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've noticed about this generation is they're extremely creative.
Yes.
I think that it kind of, falls to the generations prior that they always kind of gripe about the generations behind. Oh, they're this and they're that, oh, boomer and all that, you know how all that goes. But the reality is, every generation has some negatives, but every generation always has tons of positives as well. So you might be dealing with ones who are shy. You might be dealing with ones who are super intelligent. But I've discovered just in interacting with the teenagers I've had, they're super creative to come up with great ideas about stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I heard a friend of mine say years ago, he was talking to a group of millennials. And he said, you guys are extremely creative, extremely smart because the millennials are as well. He said, but the problem is you think the previous generations before you are the stupidest generations ever.
Yeah.
And so it's like everybody's got to learn to work together. Everybody brings a strength to the table.
And that's something too that's very, I think, important that we've tried to talk to the teens about is the Bible speaks a lot about honoring those who are older than you. And there is this move in the culture now, and there's disconnectedness in family units and family trees and all that plays into it. But there's this move in culture now to say anything that's not new is outdated, right? So you have an old iPhone, it's 4 years old, it's now outdated. It has no purpose anymore. You can't use that. And so I think they take that technological advancement mindset and then they're applying it to people, once you get above a certain age, you have nothing to say to me because you can't do these things that I can do. And it's important even for us being young to remember that older doesn't mean outdated. It means wiser when it comes to people. And the Bible speaks very highly of older Christians. And there's not much it says about young men specifically that's positive besides strong. That's all the Bible says positive about young men, you know.
I'm thinking of a movie, and I'm gonna my age is gonna show here. There was a movie years ago, I think it was in the 70s, called Logan's Run.
Okay.
And the world at that time, when you got to a certain age, I think at that time I was around 30, you went to what was known as carousel, where it picked ones in that group of people that basically, will come to find out they were, you know, as you got to a certain age, that was discarded. They were you were done.
Yeah.
And because there was no need of older. And you know what the truth of the matter is, you do need that.
Yeah,
it's
there's
like
so much that the older generations can offer. And I'm speaking because we are now older.
I don't want to
getting yes, please don't pick us out of a lineup and then take us out.
And look, if you ever watch the movie, it is the cheesiest, the worst acting, the cheesiest movie. It was made
in the 70s. It probably was. But no, the older generations have a lot to give, and still, and that's the one fear as you do age, is that you will be not needed,
kind of pushed out.
Yeah, pushed out and not needed at all. And when there is still till you draw your last breath, you have something that can be offered and taught and wisdom shared.
And I think a lot of times, older people are maybe a little scared to interact with teenagers. Nervous, like, well, what do I bring to the plate or whatever. And I love interacting with the teenagers. I see, different teens around the office and at church, and I love interacting with them. And I've kind of pushed back past the mindset of, what are their thoughts towards me? Because honestly, I just don't really care. I'm here to love you and accept you where you are. And I think my encouragement would be to every, person out there, grandparents, whatnot, just push past those insecurities you have about interacting with Gen Z, and just do it.
Yeah.
Step out there and do it.
Well, you're saying, showing, you're going to show love. Don't you think that that's really what they're craving?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're craving that interaction and that love.
And they're craving a lot of times direction and guidance. And then there's this thing about with people, and this counseling people, there's a perceived need and there's an actual need. Like, what do you think you need? And then beneath that, what do you really need? That's how God treats us, right? We think we need things, so we go to God and we pray and we earnest, and he's like, that's not what you really need.
Yeah.
That's a symptom of what you really need. And so I think for them, a lot of the desire to be influencers, to be famous, to be popular, is a desire to be known and to be connected and to be valued. Yeah. And so I think that, do younger generations need to honor and respect their elders? Of course. But I think what we can do as generations above them is respect them when we approach. Because I think there is this narrative out there where they've been written off by older generations.
Yeah.
Well, you're never going to you're not hardworking, you're never going to make it, you wouldn't survive in my day. And so they feel like, well, you wrote me off, I'm writing you off.
Right.
And so I think, as we get older, and we're not in their generation, approaching them with respect to see the good things about them that are so valuable in the kingdom too, so valuable in the church, that they have these ideas that are going to change the world. And so if we approach them with respect, that's what we found when we first came in. They're very hesitant to trust, like most people. But I think as they saw that we love them, we're not going to write them off, we're not going to count them out. They really see what they really need is that connection and that guidance they didn't know they needed sometimes.
And I think at the end of the day, they're really seeking truth. Like because everything is so filtered, there's so many different news articles, like on every social media platform. It's like, how are you supposed to identify what's actually true? Like, what is really going on? Like, are you guys deceiving me, or are y'all telling the truth? Like, which one is actual truth? And so that's what we've noticed a lot. And the direction Blake has gone with his sermon series and things. I mean, he's really just preaching out of the Bible, and they are just eating it up because they see that the Bible is truth, and then they're just wanting to take it in more and more.
I think it'd be fair to say that they've experienced a lot of clickbait. It's like this is something that is true. You click on it, you find out, whoa, that's not exactly what I thought it was.
Right.
And I think it's probably safe to say that a lot of teenagers, that's kind of what they're feeling and thinking, even in regards to Christianity. if I dive off into this, am I going to find out down the road it's really something else?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, they're being taught things like there's no such thing as absolute truth, things of that nature. And so it is where you have to take them to the truth of Scripture and just teach them. When we were youth pastors, I mean, the questions, where dinosaurs come from, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, they want to be able to know that you can back up your theology. You can talk about doctrine and show me in the Word, and why should I believe this? And, the questions that they have are legitimate.
Yeah. And you better be careful in your sermon prep too.
Yeah.
They're attentive and that they catch details. And so if you're, sloppy and pulling this from the text, they'll go, that's not what it says. Like if you kind of, eisegete it a little bit, if you and so, for example, one of the first sermon series we did getting into it was we went through the book of Daniel, not the prophetic chapters. We went through the, what's more applicable. And then afterwards we did a couple of topical series, and I had multiple kids saying, can we go back to a book of the Bible? Oh, wow. I want to see where it's coming from. And they'll bring their Bibles and open them, and they'll scrutinize. And once they determine, okay, what you're saying isn't your opinion, then they're like, well, now I believe it. And they're very informed, and they want to see where you're coming from. And I think it is because they've had the rug pulled from under them a lot. Mm-hmm. They've had all these opinions and all these perspectives, and they can almost smell fake a mile away. They really can, because everything's been filtered. They know, you can't fool them.
Well, it's kind of funny. You talk about filters. It's like people post pictures on social media. It's like, that don't look nothing like you.
I saw you yesterday.
And it's so quite obvious that's a filter you're using.
It's like, hey, quit putting filters on and just show us
be you.
You.
Yeah.
And I think that is, with Gen Z, this is me.
They want what's real.
It's like, I would say this, that it falls to us just to love them, accept them where they are, present them with truth, not based off, and you talk about authenticity. I don't know if you use that word or not, but they're really looking for the authentic.
Yes.
They're really looking. And so that's why it's important for us as believers to walk Christianity out for them. Don't just tell them, show them. And I know that, one of the things we talk about quite often here on Love Like Crazy is parents giving our kiddos an example to follow. You don't want to be the type of parent who is telling your kids something at home and living out something else in the public eye. And I think that Gen Z they're hyper aware of these things.
They are. They have a disdain for hypocrisy. Even where sometimes we do this, sometimes you seek it out where it's not, where it's like, well, that person's just flawed. They're going to make mistakes. Right. But they are very aware, because I think they've seen, I saw this person on social media, then I met them, and it's two different people. And so they're very wary before you become a mentor of theirs. They want to know, are you actually legit? Are you really who you say you are? And so I think even a part of that is just us being honest about our faults and flaws. Like, I think one of the things parents do is, they can come off as fake, not because they are, but because they're scared to show their kids their failures and their mistakes. They want you want your kid to think you're Superman as a dad. I want my son to think that I have no flaws. But if I try to hide that too much, am I showing him what dishonesty looks like? And so I think a part of it is parents being comfortable to say, hey, look, I make mistakes like you do. Repent to your children. Yeah. Tell them, I've repented to youth kids. Be like, hey, listen, I'm not perfect. I dropped the ball on that. We all, to our youth leaders who are in college, hey, I don't have the answers. I want to come to you guys for advice. And I think they value that.
Well, that word you just used has such a negative connotation to it. And unfortunately in the church, we've done that. We've made repent like a negative word. Yeah. It's actually a great word, because it's talking to you about changing. And when it comes to repenting to our kids, it's realizing, hey, I messed up, Dad. And my sons were growing up. There were numerous times that I have to go to them and say, hey, look, I messed up. I'm sorry. I lost my temper. I said something, I did something. I want to apologize to you. Yeah. And I think that is, it shows your child. I didn't always get it right, because there were times where I needed to go apologize and I probably didn't. But I think that you're hit the nail right on the head, and being able to show your kiddos, what realness is.
Yeah, and it illustrates the gospel. The gospel is, you are imperfect, you are a sinner, and yet Christ loves you, and yet God is working something beautiful out through the messes you make. And so I think when we are honest about our faults and our shortcomings, and when we approach Gen Z and say, listen, I'm not trying to be cool. I'm not trying. Like we had a youth leader when I first took over. We had a youth leader say, "We're going to get you dripped up. We're going to get some drip on you."
And he's like,
That-
what?
I'm like, drip?
Oh.
Drip's like a water park? What is it? Right?
Oh my gosh, the
drip is
terminology.
your fashion, right? It's like if you have swag.
I just learned something new today. Okay, I had no idea.
Like, if I-
Stacey, you dripped up, girl.
if you got the drip, right? And so
Well,
that,
thank
for
you.
us, it was swag back in the day. Swag is old.
Okay, it
Swag
means
is
swag.
old.
It's drip.
Okay.
And
Out.
so
I remember him with the Justin Bieber haircut.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I had the whole get up. Oh yeah.
You had it. You
He
was
had, like,
rocking
this
it, brother.
Tap out shirts and
etnies.
affliction. Yeah. And so they find our old social media pictures and they
Oh my
roast us
gosh.
endlessly.
Oh no.
I mean, getting roasted by 13-year-olds is
You know,
a whole different
glasses so big. Your sunglasses were huge.
Oh yeah,
I'm
they'll
like,
get you.
what's the style?
Yeah, but we all look back at whatever
Right,
era
right,
that
of
we were
course.
in. I
What-
mean, I lived in the 80s, and I'm sorry,
I
but the
tell them
80s
that.
were awesome. Okay.
Except for like me, okay, back in the day, I had a sick mullet.
That's
okay.
in. That's
And
in.
that
now.
is
so
in
in
now.
right now.
So the problem is now I can't. If I grow a mullet, I'm gonna look like a creeper.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that, but okay, it's in.
Oh, it's
really?
in.
It's
It
in.
is.
Oh,
I would
it's
say
very
popular?
much.
most of the boys in
No,
youth group
you're
in
not
high
doing
school.
that.
My barbershop, Danielle's
Yeah,
haircut
yeah,
that's
garage.
right. I'll get to that.
They've got on their thing listed the mullet haircut,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what?
It's
in
a baseball
the world
player
is
look.
happening?
Yeah.
It's a baseball player look.
Well, so one
Okay.
of our youth leaders came to me and they said, "We're gonna, you'll have some drip by the time you're done here." And I remember looking at him and I laughed. We had a big joke. I looked at him and I said, "You know what? I'm really glad that I'm not cool, because I think that's not what they need.
Yeah.
They don't need someone who's trying to pander to them. They
Mhm.
need someone who's genuine, authentic, and loves them.
Mhm.
Because again, I think they can smell, and they'll make jokes about youth pastors. They'll be, "Oh yeah, youth pastors, 30 years old, dressing like we do." So it's like they can smell it a mile away. And so I think there's something to say about they don't need someone who tries to dress like them or speak their language. They need someone who loves them and cares for them and can guide them and lead them.
But
And I
you
think
need to
that's important.
understand their language.
Yes, you need to understand it.
You
You
need
feel
to
to
know what
define the
they're saying.
terms.
Define the terms.
So I'm okay if I say things like, "Blake, you ain't cool at all, bro."
yeah, that's fine.
I
I've
remember
embraced it.
whenever y'all talked to him, he came home and he was like, "So what do you think I should do? Like what?" And I'm like, "Well, have you heard from the Lord on this?" And he's like, "I mean, I kind of like, I just don't know. Like, I want to hear your side of things." And I'm like, "You don't want to hear my side of things." And I'm like, because I'm like, yes, absolutely. Right now. I mean, I'm a teacher. I love
Let's
this.
do it.
Like, let's do
Yeah,
it. And
yeah.
I'm like, and I don't want to sway you. Like, I want this to be what the Lord wants you to do. And he was like, I know. And he's like, I'm going to pray some more, but I mean, I'm just not cool enough. And I would be like, but that's okay. Like, that's not what they need.
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
what they need. They don't need someone who is cool and fake.
Yeah.
They need
Mhm.
someone who's genuine. And I mean, that's a testament to all of us. Like when
Mhm.
we're reaching out, mentoring kids, mentoring teenagers, mentoring, you're adult now, mentoring 20-year-olds, whatever. It's like, you just want someone who's real. Like you want to see a real marriage. You want to see kids who serve the Lord.
Yeah.
That's your stamp of you're it. You're cool.
Mhm.
You're saying that, it's reminding me back in the day when we were youth pastors. We were newlyweds, and we were youth pastors for a couple of years, and then eventually we were children's pastors, and we stepped back into youth ministry. And every one of us, in being around other youth pastors, we all know that youth pastor is they're over the top, trying to
One of
prove
you.
how cool
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're with the kids and they're trying to talk their language, and the kids are kind of like, "Oh my gosh," so like this isn't
Yeah.
settle down, quit trying to overdo it. Well, and what we discovered is the same. Y'all are talking the same thing we discovered. The kids don't care, but they just want to know somebody loves them and cares about them. And we built some great relationships with the kiddos through the years. I keep calling them kiddos.
I know they're all grown.
And they're all grown now, and it was just to be able to sit and listen to their heart and talk to them and help guide them through whatever it was. And yeah, it's funny because we're talking about all these generation, A, B, C, D, and F, but
Yeah.
nothing has changed. They
Right,
just want to know
right.
somebody is real and loves them with the
Mhm.
love of Christ.
Mhm.
And I think about, when Paul, and it's for pastors, we have qualifications that Paul lays out, Timothy and Titus. But I think the reason Paul lays those out is because we're supposed to be examples to other believers. So I think parents can take it too, that if you're going to lead your family, have these qualifications.
Yep.
And some of them, they are all character related and they're all consistency related.
Mhm.
Besides teaching, which is a skill and a gift, it's hey, for an elder, do your kids love Jesus? Is your household stable and secure? And the teens look at that too. They'll look at you and say, is your life something I want to reproduce in my life? Do I want to be like you when I'm older? Or is your life in shambles, or are you fake, or are you hypocritical? And so I think for parents too, to say, okay, what do I want my kids to be like? Am I that? Am I genuine? Am I authentic? Am I walking in love and having those leadership qualities come out of you?
I think that was huge for us too, because I definitely came from a Christian home with parents who raised me in church and all the things. But even outside of that, like there's so many different women that I could just rattle off who really took me in and made sure that I saw the way they lived their life. I saw the way they raised their kids. But they also wanted to make sure that there was someone there that I could talk to if I had questions about the Bible or whatever it may be. Like they were always there. So even looking back, like seeing that, and then now us being able to do that.
Yeah, we got to see the mess of people's lives. They'd be like, hey, come in our house. Our kids are screaming and nothing's clean. But come in, that's discipleship.
And now I look back and I'm like, okay, it's okay that my house is a mess right now, and Maggie's on her way coming over right now, and the kids are jumping on the couch. It's okay. Like she needs to see this because this is this is reality.
It's reality, right? And we talked about that another time about how people are looking at social media as if that's they expect that's real, and it's not. It's not. It's like they social influencers want to post all the perfectly organized kitchens and all the different things, but if you were to pan that camera over to the corner, you're going to see all the stuff that was on the kitchen counter is now shoved into the corner. And so it's important that they see that this is real life. Hey, I'm raising a family, and my house is not always going to be spotless,
right?
It's lived in. That's what I call it.
That's right.
Well, and one of the things I want to say to all the parents that are listening to this is you're going through challenges right now. You're facing things with your teens, and you're like, golly, are we ever going to get past this? Are we ever going to get, I want to wring their neck. And
it's a season.
It is. You will get past
tie
this.
Tie knot and hang on.
Yeah, tie knot and hang on. You will get past this, but your kids need a great example of Christ. Just show them Jesus. Just show them Jesus.
Model that.
And I'm going to say this. You guys are a great example of this because, we watched y'all grow up. Hannah, I think we were talking about this when you guys started coming to church. I think you were what? 11, 12, somewhere?
I was 8th grade, so about
13?
12, 13,
okay.
around that.
And Blake, you were around 7. So, I don't really remember, Hannah, with you, there ever being anything with you. It was like challenging, or you were, I just always remember you just a great,
perfect
young lady who was always so respectful. Now, Blake, there was times Blake was a punk.
That's right.
Okay.
Amen.
But the cool part about this is you see you guys grow up, you see you mature, and it's all come full circle.
Yep.
Yes.
And now here you are, you're at the place where you're helping to speak into teens and lead them. And even I think you guys are going here in a little bit to do a women's Bible study. And I think you're one of the ones helping to lead that Bible study. So it's like, I say all that to say this. Parents are like, golly, is there any hope for me? Yes. Just stay consistent, stay faithful, keep loving them, keep showing them Jesus.
We'll take that too with our 3-year-old.
Yeah. It's funny. There's an author, he writes about education and parenthood. And he said one time, he has a school that he oversees. And he said, I told all the teachers, all these girls that you teach, they're going to be future nurses and doctors. And the teacher's like, yeah, that's awesome. And I said, you see all these boys you teach? They're going to be future doctors and lawyers. And they're like, how?
I can't believe
I can't imagine that. And so there is hope to say that, this is a temporary season. Be faithful and consistent. Don't underestimate the power of the gospel to transform the lives of even teenagers. What they need is what we need. They need Jesus. They need grace. They need mercy. And those little boys who were punks and ran around the church tearing things up, like I might have done with your son,
with a Justin Bieber haircut.
That's right. They, if you love them and lead them in the way they should go, they will grow up to be men one day.
Josiah will be a great leader.
He is. We have a very strong-willed 3-year-old.
I will say this much, though. One of the things that I think is key in this as well, your parents had you both involved in the church. It was not a once-a-year type of occurrence. It was a consistent involved within the church. And you were involved in the youth group. You were involved in serving and helping. And that is crucial. A lot of parents just kind of brush that off and think, oh, well, it's kind of an elective that we'll add in from time to time. But it's one of the main courses that you need to have that your kiddos consistently see that in your lives as a family.
I will even say at the time when I started coming, I started coming to Journey because I started coming without my parents. They were going to a different church at the time. We were kind of, we had gone to another church. We grew up at that church, and long story short, we ended up going somewhere else. Yeah, we were in transition, and I just didn't feel a part of that youth group. Like I tried to go, and it was a different community, so none of the kids went to school with me. I was having a hard time, and Heather Miller and Dean Wells both taught at the school I was at, and so they were like putting up flyers around the school about the youth group, and I was like, okay, I'll go. And I had a couple of friends who had gone, and so I went, and I loved it, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. I want to come here every week. And then I was like, well, Mom, I'm gonna go Sunday morning, and she was like, well we're gonna go, and I'm like, I can just walk across the street, like it's fine.
Right,
My dad's like, you're not walking across the street, like we'll drop you off, okay? So they would go to their church, and then I would go to Journey, and it came to a point where they were like, I want to be a part of what's going on, and like we're going to go as a family.
Yeah.
And then like that's what pulled them there. So just even not only getting your child in church, but going with them and like making that a priority as a family. And like that was huge to me. Like they weren't sure where they wanted to be, and it was like they made this decision, and then the Lord honored all of it. Like it was exactly where they were supposed to be.
And finding a church that values the next generation and invests in them is so important, because like we said, it can be so easy to write people off who are different than you, and every generation is different than the one coming up.
Yes.
And so find a church that values, empowers, leads younger people, and have your kid plugged in. And that's the thing for us, in our lives. I come from a divorced family, a divorced home. And so the mentors that I had in the church were so vital in me learning what it looked like to be a godly man, to be a husband, to be a father. And so, I think of maybe 5 or 6 men off the top of my head who were youth leaders or youth pastors or pastors in my life who mentored me. And I heard things from them that I wouldn't have received from my parents. My parents could have told me the exact same thing in the exact same tone. And I would have said, that's dumb. I'm not doing that. But when this leader that I looked up to said it at the church, I'm like, wow, he's so profound, But there's something about having multiple influences for your kids, because, there comes those teenage years where mom and dad aren't cool anymore. Mom and dad, there's that tension in the household where they're preparing to leave and be their own person.
Yeah.
And so I think having the church to support, having leaders, youth pastors who are real, are authentic, do care, love Jesus, know the Bible, who can speak into your kid's life when you guys aren't seeing eye to eye. Because raising teenagers, there's a lot of this. And sometimes they need to go, someone who has your back as parents. They need to go to the mentor who has your back too, to say, hey, your parents are right. Let's go
That's
home.
right.
Well, and just so you know, this is for future reference for you guys with your kids. When we were raising up our sons, because I'm a pastor and because she's a pastor, anytime we would tell them something, they were always like, man, that's so awesome. That's so deep and profound. And we received that. That's not what they did at all.
No, but I have to say it has come full circle. Now that they're older, they will say, oh yeah. They'll say, we had a great childhood, and
Dad,
remember,
right.
Yeah, Dad, you were right. And we remember when you always preached such and such, and we'd be like, you were listening. We are so yeah, those seeds sown, and we'll come back.
Well, the cool part about it is you're talking about how having somebody to speak into their life that'll be honest with them and love them with the love of Christ. And so that's it. Kind of goes back to that mindset of having them involved in something that's bigger than them within the body of Christ, a church, a group. So
yeah, and you never know those seeds that you're planting now in all of their lives. There'll be a harvest for sure. Yeah.
Get them in a church and be plugged in. Be at the parent meetings, parents for the youth group.
There you go.
The kids who have seen the most transformation in youth group are the ones whose parents have our number. They know us. Their parents are involved.
Yes.
So get your kid in a good church. Bring them consistently. Show them Jesus in your life. Sympathize with them. Appreciate their differences. And they love truth. They love honesty. And they're very smart. So be ready for some questions. Yeah. That's for sure.
Definitely.
Well, do us a favor as we wrap up this episode. Tell our listeners where they can find you guys on social media.
Facebook or
TikTok.
Instagram.
TikTok.
Blake's doing TikTok videos.
Doing dances.
No. He is super cool.
Yeah, so Instagram, Facebook, at Blake Comeaux, BlakeComo. Got that
Oh,
one in
yeah,
high
he
school.
didn't
Spelt my name
spell it
differently on
right.
my Instagram handle in high school.
That's when you were cool.
But I
That's
mostly,
high school.
mostly Facebook. We're millennials. It's Facebook
Yeah.
for us.
Mine's Hannah Ashford Comeaux, all one word.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's been fun.
This has been great. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing today.
Thank you guys.
It's
Great
great
information.
it's great to see ones that we watch grow up,
Yes.
be here today and see y'all's
Mhm.
parents, see y'all's pastors, and it's been an absolute blast. So thank y'all for coming today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And to all of our listeners, we hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode. We've had an absolute blast. You got to see Pastor Jay do a little dance. So if you want to put that on TikTok, go for it. But
If they're watching on YouTube,
yeah,
they
okay.
can see your dance.
Yeah. But anyway, listen, like, subscribe, share, help us get the word out, help us to continue to grow this podcast as we are all about building a stronger family, building a stronger marriage. As always, I'm Jay.
And I'm Stacey.
And this is Love Like Crazy.